No, I mean, like, I want to give people, that those present here, the opportunity to ask questions, burning questions, and also those on Zoom. Thank you for your amazing presentation. But I also want to give you the opportunity to kind of like tell us how you see this trajectory from your work, what changed in Chile, because now since 2018 we have a feminist movement, right? Like, so how do you see points of connections and differences between your works? And I'll intersperse the second agenda, which is like, can you tell us a little bit of like your writing, your academic writing? What's your project about? What's the intervention there? Even like, as we discussed in terms of like, what is your voice, right? As less a critic and more like autoethnographic, or like, how do you position yourself as this activist scholar in a field, in a profession that kind of discourages that, right? As we talked yesterday. So yeah, so take it away.
Well, the first is a difficult question, but what comes into my mind is that I left Chile in 2019, so just before the social unrest and like the political revolution, revolt that took place. So I think that in this very last years, many things have changed in Chile. I don't know if you know, but in 2019 there was a huge political revolt. Because of that, there was a constitutional convention, a referendum that chose to change the constitution in Chile. The constitution that, as Sibila told you, was written during the dictatorship. So we were all very happy. It was a referendum that won by 83% of the people voted yes, we want a new constitution. There was a constitutional convention, so people were elected to write this new constitution. The huge majority of those people elected were not politicians, were people from everywhere in the country, from dissidents, from indigenous communities. So it was a beautiful heterogeneous group of people. They worked for more than a year in writing this new constitution. And just about a couple of months ago, there was another referendum where people had to vote if they accepted that constitution or not. And unfortunately, the vast majority of the Chilean population rejected the new constitution. So now we are in a very perplexed moment of trying to understand what will come next. So going back to your question, I think that happened in a few years, but it has completely changed the political landscape of where we are standing. Yes, that's what I comes into my mind.
I'm going to put a video, but just leave it there without sound, of a performance that is related to what Maria Jose was saying, like all these referendums that we had many referendums regarding the possibility of a new constitution. And this one, we did it with the first one. It was this idea of taking the constitution, the old one, but also, for example, like other things that you don't want anymore, like patriarchy, the nuclear family, like colonialism, etc. And we did like this walking, because Valparaiso, our city, is like this, it's like with hills. So going down into the sea and just throw it out. But it wasn't thrown to the sea. It was thrown to a little boat, then left. So it was like this symbolic idea of everything that came through the sea with colonizers and stuff can just go back, And yes, exactly. In that moment, we were hoping. We were very, very hopeful, like this idea that we are living a revolution. Like I'm being really honest. I never thought I was going to live that. I was for sure that in Chile things were never going to change. Like I wasn't a positive person regarding the political scenario, but in that moment everything changed, and now it's like we came back to that former scenario. So we don't really know what's going to happen. It's been really difficult, But I think that also through performance, probably, and through art, we are going to point it out to these questions to try to understand why is this happening, you know. And in the end, what it shows us is that socially and politically, things are always more complicated than we think. It's not so binary, you know, like, now we're here, now we're there. No, it's like there's many spheres, many things happening. And sadly, a lot of the tradition that comes from the dictatorship also, this tradition of fear. There's a lot of fear of change. Like in the end, is the idea of everything can be really, sorry for this, like shitty, but it doesn't matter because it's like I already know this reality. I can control it. This idea that things could change and like break the stability of things, it's like no, I don't want that. You know.
And hoy vimos el miedo, ¿no? Today we think fear. Today we see fear.
Pero el video se vio como un desorden.
I think also, just to give a hopeful note, that something interesting in Chile is that I think that social movements have built one over another and have been layering and like generations have been learning how to dispute the public space. Like when we did Querer No Ver in 2013, it was the most massive performance in the street at that time, and it was pretty unique still. But from 2013 to 2018, I think that we trained ourselves to be on this, to dispute the streets on performance. Mm-hmm. And this is something, for instance, also that we can see in our political scenario, because our current president was the leader of the student mobilizations that occurred like 15 years ago. So he was in the streets when he was 20 years old, leading the student protests, and now he is the president. So there are changes and I think that we really have learned, and particularly with performance, if you go to any manifestation in Chile now, like it's full of performance. It's so rich. I think that it's really a tool that we have learned to use. Everyone, not the artists, like everyone on the streets. So this is very interesting, and I think it's something pretty unique to Chile. How like we have like trained ourselves to do that.
From the student mobilization in 2011, there was also a big uprising in Chile, but from students. But I still was a student. Mm-hmm. I was there too. But it was crazy because, like Maria Jose said, it wasn't that artists are going to do performances and stuff. It's like everyone. It's this idea of understanding as like political beings. Like if we're going to do this fight, we need to find different strategies. Like we need to find different ways to approach this, and so that we're going to be on the press, and so that people can really see this is happening. So in that year, I think it was a moment that it was already happening, but in that moment, it was like it installed itself in the context of protest. And for us today, performance and protest are very related in the public space. Like it's very something that happens a lot. And regarding the other question, regarding what we think, what we write, our voices, what we've been talking about these years, these days also. So, sí, lo voy a repetir. But I think for me personally, it's crazy what happened when you decide to have a collective writing, and then you have to go back to an individual writing. What happens right now with me, for example, is that I'm doing a PhD thesis. I have to finish it, like now, in a few months. Yeah. But I'm super happy. No. So I have to do this, but also I've been writing these past years with the collective. We've been writing books, we've been doing anthologies like compilation, we've been writing songs, we've been writing, like performances, like scripts of other things, etc. And suddenly it's like, no, now you have to leave this collective place and go back to the individual one. Because that is already a transfer, going from the individual to the collective. For example, when we write as a collective, we write stuff separately, but then we just put it there and it's colectivo la tesis. I'm not going to say, this chapter I write, It's like, it doesn't matter, it's a collective, And now what I have to do with the PhD is doing the exact opposite. So this idea of writing again as an individual. And it's been super difficult for me. I have this crazy imposter syndrome. I think even more like strong in me because of that. Because I have this idea that I'm talking, but everything that I'm saying is things that I have discussed in it with the collective, with my friends, with my partner, with my family, with you. You know, it's this. I have this feeling that in the end we are a collective also. You know, that what I'm trying to express there is not only like mine, like. So I'm trying to be very clear when I write because I'm also doing this auto-ethnographic work because of that, of being very clear that when I'm speaking, it's not only me who's speaking because there's all these other collective experiences that are going to be there. I can't avoid that. It's not true, you know. It's not true. It's not like this idea of originality. Like for me, that doesn't exist. First, but also it's like I don't want to put my name on something like a brand, you know. And now this belongs to me. It's not like that because I think that when you are working from a feminist point of view for so long and you're working collectively, suddenly it is a problem. This individual's place. But for example, for a PhD, it needs to have your name. I can't write it, you know, like a collective. I can't, even if it's only me writing it. It's like you have I don't know, a personality. Like, yeah, like, you know, no, but yes.
But what's your thesis? Can we read that?
Huh?
What's your thesis for this dissertation? Do you want to say it?
Yeah. But well, I actually entered the PhD on 2018, the same year when Colectivas thesis began. So everything has been very related for me. And I entered with a project trying to address resistance through bodies, like collective bodies, in the public space. And then this big feminist uprising happened in 2018 in Chile. So I was like, okay, I'm going to then address it from, to the feminist performance in the public space. But then what happens, I start doing with the collective feminist performance in the public space. So it's everything is kind of articulated, like all these different dimensions of my life in this case start like getting together. And my hypothesis that I write it down on 2018, because it's the same until this day, it didn't change. Like everything changed, but that didn't change, was that the feminist performance in Chile in the last 3 years, like from 2018 to 2020, creates disruptions in the field of power, like a perturbation, like it disturbs the field of power. When through feminist performance, we create a collective political feminist body, you know, on the public space. And suddenly, what happened, for example, with Reggae in Japan, kind of corroborates my thesis. You know, so it's very, very difficult, like how to also approach this from a critical point of view, but without being a critic of my work, because that's super weird. It's like you can like start doing like a critical, like a critic's job with your own work. So how can I, from my own experience, address this topic, and also like realize when actually these disruptions are happening and when they are not happening. That we were discussing it yesterday with Maria Jose. So it doesn't get like too naive. So it's super difficult.
Yes. For me, like part of my activism has been like decolonizing the academic setting itself. When I when I started teaching in the university in Chile, like the first question I got was, "But are you an artist or a scholar? Like, are you a practitioner or a theoretician? Like, do you want to write books or do you want to make theater or performance?" And this was super weird for me because I had a training where things were really embedded. So I got into the university with this very binary setting of like the studio-based courses or theory-based courses. And the continual demand to define myself, like, are you a scholar or are you an artist? Like, it wouldn't be possible to be both. So during my more than 15 years in the academic setting, what I've been really trying to do is to push the boundaries and to decolonize that idea of the mind separate from the body, the thinking or the word separate from the action, and to really create spaces where students and faculty and everyone can really combine these two dimensions that are really combined. So when I teach like theory courses, I always have like a practice-based modules, exercises, assignments. When I teach studio-based courses, I always also think about practice. So I'm always like trying to practice theory and theorize practice. And I've been doing that, and this have many shapes. It has formed my teaching, but it also has led me in Chile to be one of the founders of a PhD program that is a practice-based PhD program where students, candidates can do performance or art practice as research. And this was a huge struggle first with our universities authorities. Like I remember I had a meeting with all these engineer, like vice-rectores, like vice deans or whatever. And they were like, a musical composition can be researched? I don't think so. Or are you saying that theater produces knowledge? So we had like years to convince them what type of knowledge was that? Why was it important to produce that knowledge? What was the legitimacy to do that? Once the university authorities said, okay, whatever, do whatever, we have to go to the National Commission of Accreditation of PhD programs. And that was a very interesting meeting because we got there with all these bureaucrats, academic bureaucrats. And they told us, well, you know, we've never told any like faculty that want to do a PhD program what to do because you're the experts. We just need to fill in this form. So just pitch us about what you're trying to do and we'll give the okay. So we started explaining the idea of a practice-based, art practice-based program. And again, it was, this lady had like a pearl collar and she started like grasping and again it was like sorry, I'm not getting this. Like a PhD candidate can make a performance and that would be like their PhD work. And we were like, yes, they can also write a dissertation about it, but that's also a type of knowledge that's an embodied knowledge that needs to be mobilized. So, and that's I think also what I will be doing hopefully now at Columbia, like how can we disrupt or decolonize this very hegemonic, Western hegemonic approach to knowledge systems that's very neoliberal, where knowledge is conceived as a product, a thing, like this idea to transfer knowledge, like as if it's something like, there you are, there's knowledge. And to change and shift that conception to practices of knowledge and to disrupt this binary that's like from the Greeks of the mind and the body, and really have like a decolonial and feminist approach to how we produce and share these practices of knowledge. And I have like this political struggle within the academic settings, and I think it's very, very important because the university is very anachronic many times. As a big institution, we are always as the institution very behind of what's going on like in the real world. Sometimes, not always. So I think that particularly in the art schools, it's necessary really to redefine and rethink this very strict boundary between theory and critics and practice or artists.
And I will add also the collective and collaborative point of view, like how the places where we do these transfers of knowledge are not like transfer from one direction to another, but in many directions. So it is very important that when we are, for example, in a classroom, it's not a frontal space, like where there's a teacher just talking and it's over, you know. That sometimes we also have the feeling that sometimes even students want that. It's like, I want you to give me the knowledge and then go back. And it's like, no. That's not, you know, from this point of view, the way to connect with learning. You need to experience it. You need to discuss it. We need to talk about it. We need to, you know, like doing also in a collaborative way in the end. And I think that's also related to that decolonial and feminist perspective of how we relate in this, for example, educational field.
There are programs, practice-based PhD programs in art where they are already admitting, for instance, like collectives writing a dissertation. And I find that like really, like I think it would be impossible to think something like that here in the US. But it would make so much sense on how we really create art today. Like I think that every time, even in the professional field of the art, whatever that is, it's very rare to have like people in their solitude creating things. So why not having collective dissertation? And that poses other questions about collective writing, like writing in 4 hands, 6 hands, 8 hands.
Great. Speaking of which, we ran out of time for conversations, but you can stick around and address them, like, approach them. You can email them. It was so amazing that we used all the time.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Great. Yeah, so,
Anyone who wants to ask
thank you
questions,
for
can just
coming.
come.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to kind of let go the ones that need to leave, but yeah, feel free to approach the speakers. Thank you.
Tengo muchas preguntas. Bueno, vamos a estar en el me encantó, fantástico. Hay preguntas que los movimientos sociales